up?
Still alive,
No.
fucking piece of shit. Look at me. Look at my fucking eyes.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a cinephile. To me, being a cinephile was better than being president of the United States. To own a Criterion Laserdisc, to go walk into an Odeon theater, it meant being somebody in a neighborhood full of nobodies. You didn't have to wait in line. You had the best seats, because nobody went to see art movies. The projectionists knew you by name. It was a lifestyle. Take a movie like Vitelloni. To us, it was the standard. It's the ultimate litmus test, a way to see who was a real person and who was just a civilian. To be honest, I've never met a soul in my life who didn't like this movie. I mean, how could you not?
Well, now you have.
Now go home and get your fucking shine box.
No, I'm serious. I didn't like it.
What the fuck is wrong with you people?
Well, I Vitelloni was meaning the wastrels, or the guys who just, fellows who just hang out.
Right.
Really, these are 32-year-old guys who still live at their mothers,
sounds
don't
like,
work.
Sounds like Main Streets
Sounds
to
like
me.
exactly. And when I saw it after La Strada. Actually, I think it was made before La Strada, though.
Yeah.
And the combination of the lifestyle, showing these five guys in the small town of Rimini, which is his hometown, really was kind of an autobiographical film of his. That and the humor of it was very important. Alberto Sordi and the type of humor they had, which was very much the street humor that I grew up with. And I went to look at the film and I began to realize that I was aiming towards making pictures about my friends and myself anyway, but that was it. When I finally saw Vitelloni, I said, well, that's the only way.
You were confirmed in your own instincts.
Absolutely. I mean, if he could do it about Rimini, I could do it about Elizabeth Street.
I'm Eric Trommater.
I am Sila Blume.
I'm Erin Brown, and I'm just glad nobody got eaten this week.
I'm Koom Kankesan.
And I'm Jennifer Trujillo. And I didn't like it. So there.
Motherfucking you fucking piece of shit!
Oh, and this is World Cinema History.
Lavoratori! Lavoratori della Mazda!
We're back! No more cannibals, no more Maoist groupthink. Today, we're breathing in the salt air of 1953 Rimini. We're talking about Federico Fellini's I Vitelloni, the Overgrown Calves. I know I pushed you guys to the brink with Godard, but I Vitelloni is the reward. It's the blueprint for American graffiti, diner, and mean streets. It's a film about five men standing on a beach, trying to pretend the future's not happening. Jennifer, you didn't like it? Really?
All right, what's the fucking matter with you? What is the fucking matter with you? What are you, stupid or what?
Jennifer, I'm going to let you open the panel. What were your opening thoughts on I Vitelloni?
Just because I didn't like the film overall, I think you're coming to get to know me, that I am open to seeing it through your eyes and the panel's eyes, and I'm really eager to see the cool things. I understand that Fellini is a bastion of film and modern film. And from watching our patterns here, I can see some things that come through, like I see some Goodfellas and stuff. But all that being said, I'm going to be honest, the angry feminist lesbian in me, or the female in me, or female presenting human being, not happy.
We just call you Jennifer.
Yeah. Well, Jennifer, this gal, this lesbian here, was not happy with the boys. Let's let the boys be boys. I didn't love the story and the characters, and it really, it wasn't even like one level of bad. Fausto just like, you thought he was being horrible, and then he kicked it up a notch, and then he kicked it up another notch, and then he threw gasoline on the fire. It was really hard for me to stomach. I get that there's these boys being boys and they're hanging out and people thought it was fun and people excuse it. And I understand it was a period of time, but it's a really good lens of, this was very in your face. And this is very much the world that we're still even existing in, and part of the world I fight against. So to that end, the story bummed me out. There were some cool elements, and I do see the idea of like the Goodfellas and this gang of friends, even maybe Stand By Me kind of energy. Like, I get that. I'm not its target audience for sure. And, to that end, it didn't ring. The story didn't land with me. I was horrified, and you really almost gotta know. Text in the middle of the night, like, I'm out. I don't want to watch this, but I want to watch it because I love being here with you all. I love this podcast and getting to walk through these films with everybody else's eyes and perspectives. And that's only going to help me grow as a human being, as someone who loves film and storytelling on screen. So bring it, kids. I'm here. Or bring it, my friends. I'm here to be with you. That's what I say.
Like the policeman in Casablanca, Jennifer Trujillo was shocked to find machismo and sexism in 1953 Italy. Sila Blume, your opening thoughts.
Wait, okay. And here's a man patronizing me. Okay, noted. I'll take it because I like you.
If I may say something shortly, I understand what you said, Jennifer. At least I claim to understand it. But I would say you cannot detach the very, very, very Italian mentality in the whole society, not just of the 50s or any time. The Italian way of doing machismo is very particular and very, very energetic in many ways, even though, just like in Turkey, you see on the streets, the one in charge is always the mother, not the father. I understand how you feel about that. I thought about that, not from your perspective. And for me, this film is so intensely Italian, and you cannot take machismo away from Italians. It just doesn't. It will never work.
I don't know that it'll never work, but I agree that it is deeply
Well, I don't
ingrained.
mean it in a, machismo doesn't have to be, and I'm not an expert on this, obviously, but I don't think machismo can only be taken in a negative way. There are many ways of taking machismo. Ever since I'm a little kid, and today as an adult, many decades later, every single time I walk on the sidewalk with a lady, it is impossible for me to go on the inside of the sidewalk. It's absolutely impossible. I just cannot do that. And
Do you know why they originally came up with that practice, Sila?
Pardon?
So you won't get hit by the streetcars. Yeah.
No, it goes back far before streetcars. It's because people used to empty their bedpans out of the upper windows onto the sidewalk.
Another problem.
For me, that's not the point. The point is there's an intrinsic command in my system that tells me I must protect this woman I am with. It could be my mother. It could be my sister. It could be my son. Actually, I will not be able to, because in my essence, they are under my protection. And if I walk the streets of Barcelona with my son, I will not be on the inside. And my point is, this is a positive side of machismo, not because it's benevolent, but because it doesn't have the intentionality that normally machismo has.
Right. So I have that male energy machismo as well. I think there's a line in machismo. I agree with you, Sila. I'm with you. And I'm the same, actually. I am the person that walks on the outside. I am the person that, moves to protect.
We're going
to
have a big fight if we walk down the sidewalk.
Yeah. And we're going to get to doors and you're going to want to open. But just to put it out there, and I know we should go to the film and learn about the film parts because I want to hear that. But the consent is also incredibly sexy and important. And this film did not show, it not only showed betrayal of consent, but repeated betrayal of that and trust, which that really bothered me. And that's all story. I'm happy to hear what you thought. What did you think of the film and the filmmaking of Fellini? Tell me the greats of this, everyone. I'm ready. I'm here for it.
Let's go to Koom Kankesan, who joined us last week for Passion of Anna and said he had so much fun, he decided to come again. This was your first viewing, so you just watched this today just for this episode, right, Koom?
Yeah, I watched it just before we started recording. So once again, I'm in a similar position as last week, kind of jumping in last minute. I didn't intend to, but like Eric said, I had such a good time, and I still just didn't feel I could. But Eric very slyly slipped me an advance recording of last week's podcast yesterday, and listening to it, I felt, oh my God, I've got to commit to coming back soon.
Yeah! One of us! One of us! Google gobble! Google gobble! One of us! One of us!
Yeah, thanks. It's great to be here, and it's a bit like last week, except the obverse. Last week, I didn't, because I was coming in last minute, have a chance to view the film, but I knew it from having loved it and seen it a few times, and felt like I knew a certain amount about Bergman. This time it's flipped. I got to see the film, but I don't know a lot about Fellini, so I might be in the backseat a bit more here. I do love Coppola and Scorsese quite a lot, and I have knowledge about them. So I was trying not to watch this film in light of it being linked to Scorsese's Mean Streets, and the intro references Goodfellas. I think we should also mention, of course, Who's That Knocking at My Door? But there is also a kind of difference here because Fellini has a kind of formal thing that's left over from the middle of the century that's still there in his film that's being kind of excised once you get to America in the 70s. But also there's humor in the Scorsese films that's kind of similar to the humor here. The Fellini film is satirical because, yeah, it's got the machismo and stuff, but at the same time, these guys are painted as kind of losers, and there is a critique of them in the film, while at the same time being kind of soft and sympathetic, as I think Jennifer rightly pointed out. I mean, it ends in this epic ass-whooping by the father of Fausto. So Fausto gets his comeuppance, despite, acting repeatedly like a cad. I don't know if you want to call it dysfunctional, but at least a satirical aspect of his marriage, his relationship with Sandra, the clock is reset and the cycle begins anew at the end of that film. I mean, it's hilarious to watch Fausto so cheerily wishing his father goodbye and wishing everybody well and them just walking off. That beating could have been much more dramatic and tragic in a different film. The violence of it is totally underscored by the satire of it.
Thanks, Koom. Erin, your first thoughts on Vitelloni?
There's a lot I agree with Jennifer on, with Fausto being the absolute worst. And I'm a little pissed at Moraldo for not doing anything about it, because that's his sister that this dude's cheating on. But overall, I thought it was cute. I thought it was a cute, funny, silly film with some drama, but overall, it's just here are these five losers, and we're going to laugh at them being losers and all their little misadventures. But at the end, we realize they're not going anywhere, and that's why Moraldo has to leave, because he's never going to have a better life if he sticks around with these guys who are doing nothing to improve their lives. So yeah, I liked it. I thought it was goofy, and it did put me in mind of the films like Diner and American Graffiti and all that, because it's a group of friends doing their things. But I also agree Fausto was the fucking worst. One thing I did like, actually two things, but the main thing I liked is that after he harassed his boss's wife, his boss believed his wife and fired him because he tried to spin it like nothing happened, and then she came on to him, and he was like, no, that's not what happened, you're out. And he needed that wake up call. But Moraldo was an idiot and believed him and told his sister, and she believed that because she wanted to. But I like that the boss stood up for his wife, and then his father stood up for Sandra at the end, because that was a well-earned ass-kicking, I thought.
We do go through a lot more unlikable characters in these European films than American film fans, I think, are used to.
In the Scorsese films, those characters are truly unlikable, but that's not the point. You're so spellbound by the mastery of Scorsese's techniques, and because it's kind of different from what other American films are doing.
Well, I'm funny how? I mean, funny like I'm a clown, I amuse you. I make you laugh. I'm here to fucking amuse you. What do you mean funny? Funny how? How am I funny?
Whereas here, I think the characters are more likable or sympathetic, partly because they're not arch criminals, and they're not homicidal, and they're not sociopathic in the same way. They're just immature. I mean, I was kind of shocked to learn Fausto was 30 years old. I thought maybe he was in his early 20s, maybe mid-20s, given his immaturity, especially given it's the middle of the 20th century and people grew up a lot faster then. Generally, I didn't find them unlikable. There's a lot of celebration of life and bon vivantness in this film.
The title of the film literally means Overgrown Calves, and in 1953, Italy was shaking off the post-war depression, but there was an industrial bubble growing, and so there was a whole kind of lost generation where there hadn't been jobs for these people for almost their entire lives, and here they were, full-grown adults, as you pointed out, in their late 20s and early 30s, and suddenly that excuse was gone, and these people who had been forced to be loafers their entire lives are suddenly expected to become part of society again. Let's look at the other Italian films that we have covered on this podcast, because of course Ancora Domani, There's Still Tomorrow, was actually made in 2025, but that took place in the immediate wake of fascism, and the culture was defined by survival and the vote, a world of domestic shadows where finding a voice was as vital as finding bread. And then in 1952, Umberto D., the rubble was being cleared out from World War II, but the heart was still cold. This was the institutional failure of New Italy.
Business bad? Fuck you, pay me. Oh, you had a fire? Fuck you, pay me. Place got hit by lightning, huh? Fuck you, pay me.
A man and his dog discarded by a society so focused on the future, it forgot to build the past. And here in 1953, we have the bridge film, I Vitelloni. The economic miracle is starting to hum. And for the first time, the problem isn't the lack of resource. It's a vacuum of purpose. It's a moment the country realized that once you have bread, you might realize that you have no idea what to actually do with your life. 1963's The Organizer. 10 years later, the miracle, the Italian economic miracle, had created an industrial giant, and the culture had shifted to the birth of the labor movement. In 1967, we were looking at China is Near in the late 1960s, and we moved into the ideological groupthink and disillusionment. But look closely, China is Near would not be possible without, of course, Godard, but Fellini paving the way. You need Godard's formal rebellion, but you also need Fellini's internal subjective focus to even care about the neuroses of the young radicals. And then in 1975, Seven Beauties, filmed during what was called the Years of Lead. The culture has become grotesque. The Italian economic miracle turned out to be a bubble, but the morality of Italy was gone and replaced by cynical survivalism. So the only person who was here for every one of these episodes was Erin Brown. Erin, any thoughts in terms of this film as fitting into all of the Italian films that we've covered on the podcast?
You're right about it being a bridge film because it definitely covers in between what was going on. One thing that did stick out, though, that was funny to me is that the machismo that we were discussing earlier, seeing that in this film made Seven Beauties make a whole lot more sense. I kind of wish I had seen something like this before I saw Seven Beauties so I'd have a better understanding of what she was satirizing in that film. But yeah, I think, the hopefulness of this, where they have to get jobs and there's a future coming up that Moraldo's out looking for, I think that does perfectly fit right in between how everything stopped post-war and then everything collapsed again later. It was, it fit just perfectly in between those said films.
And I don't think you'd be surprised to find out Burt Mueller was one of Fellini's assistants.
Oh,
and
ding, ding.
He learned at the feet of the maestro. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Well, no, I needed that. And that's one of the things I was going to ask. Can you elaborate, Eric and Erin, a little bit about, I heard she satirized. She was an assistant, so she lived in that world. Are there other things that you think that now with the perspective, you see this film differently and the other film differently? Because I'm going to watch both of them to try to catch up in this connection.
Well, I think the Fausto character would be someone you could just plug into Seven Beauties and have him go through the exact same things that he went through. And I don't think the film would change a bit, Erin, quite honestly.
I agree.
Wouldn't you agree with me?
Definitely, because Fausto was the worst, and so was the lead of Seven Beauties. They're just overly macho assholes who are incredibly immature. Yeah,
But where
it would have been
this film
interesting to
comes
see.
down to one ass beating in Seven Beauties, he goes through.
Oh my God, yes. So many horrible things.
It's a tough movie for some people.
It is.
It is.
It's a hard movie. It's ugly. It's, got some really grotesque things that happen. He is not a good person. He's a monster. And
But it's a comedy
yeah, but it's a comedy. That's what makes it
with
so wild.
with the funniest fart joke in the history of cinema.
Yeah,
What?
that was a hell of a thing.
The funniest fart
Oh
joke
my
in the
God.
history of cinema. Yeah.
Okay,
You
leave
gotta
leave
watch
me
it.
here. I have homework. Don't spoilers. I will wait for that moment and
Okay.
relish in it.
It's
I'm also relishing in the perspective, Aaron, that you gave that it's like sunlight and darkness, right? That
mhm,
Fausto looks one way with I don't know his name, the other guy that
yeah.
seemed the calmer, the better of the bunch, right? To
Moraldo.
look better.
Yeah.
Moraldo.
Moraldo. Thank you.
Moraldo, yeah.
So without Fausto being such the way, it wouldn't have made sense on the journey of Moraldo of watching them. He's like a voyeur to them, but then deciding he wanted more, needed more, and he leaves. So I like
Yeah.
that story.
Yeah,
Yeah, good.
Moraldo is a
Thank
little
you.
bit like Ray Liotta's character because
In Goodfellas,
yeah,
yes, I love Goodfellas. Let's go.
in Goodfellas because even though Ray Liotta isn't a particularly likable or admirable character, he's just better than the rest of the bunch. He's better than Tommy or Jimmy or any of the others because he actually has some reservation before going ahead and committing awful acts, although he does do that too sometimes. What I think is different though is that Moraldo introduces the guys, so you feel like he's your anchor into that film, but there isn't really much voiceover narration throughout the film, so you kind of forget about Moraldo.
I want to correct you. We don't actually know who's narrating the film.
Oh,
We know
okay.
it's one of them.
Okay, I thought it was
Correct.
Moraldo because I thought it would
It's
kind of.
somebody from the future. We don't know which one.
Yeah,
We know
I
because he
don't think
keeps
it's
saying
any
it's
of them.
we, but he keeps referring to Moraldo in the third person.
That's
and
right.
when Moraldo leaves on the train,
That's right. So
he is leaving.
that's why I thought that might have even made a kind of mistake or something that was left over from an early intention that wasn't carried through.
Now, it's a very typical Fellini thing because he is saying, so this is somebody from 1973 looking at 1953, but he filmed the film in 1953. It is the same technique that Marcel Proust used in his novels and James Joyce used quite a bit. It's this kind of this omniscient person who's still taking place in the narrative. It is unique in film, I think, to Fellini. Joyce did it very, very well in especially Ulysses. But what it allows for is you can take a novel and tell it from, in Ulysses' case, 16 different points of view. And James Joyce was just an absolute master at it. Fellini is the only one who really, I think, could do that in film, where the way he moves the camera, you can just move from person to person to person to person, and you don't have a central point of view. You are actually able to accumulatively get a story by viewing it from all of the different angles. And this, I think, was a very early version of that, and it is something he did deliberately, I think, not telling us who among the crowd is the actual narrator.
Interesting. Just coming back to Moraldo because Jennifer started off talking about him. He is kind of despicable because he doesn't stand up to Fausto and even kind of aids or allows Fausto to, basically cheat on his own sister, on Moraldo's sister.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
None of them.
His leaving at the end is kind of strange too, if he's not our central anchor in the film. If he is like the Ray Liotta character, as I thought originally, as in he's supposed to be the most neutral of the bunch, and he's like our window or our anchor for this group of people, it kind of makes sense that he's also the one that does not fall into their follies as much, and though leaves and through that realization leaves at the end. So he sort of sides with us because we are looking at these people, not really identifying with them, but the satire comes in where it's kind of looking at them through a lens or a microscope. And I thought because of that, Moraldo just seems more genial, more somewhat likable, more human, less satirized.
I took the narrator to be a composite of all of them because it doesn't need to be any specific one of them because it's telling all of their stories together. That's what makes the most sense.
I mean, there is a concurrent value often of that everyman, like that Willy Loman type perspective or character. So maybe it is that.
Moraldo is the only character who goes on an actual journey in this film, who actually grows and who actually changes. And so Koom is right in terms of he is our everyman, in a way. But if you look back at The Death of a Salesman, that is not told from Willy Loman's point of view. It's told from his best friend.
Nobody dashed blame this man. You don't understand. Willie was a salesman. And for a salesman, there's no rock bottom to life. Now, he don't put a bolt to a nut. He don't tell you the law or give you medicine. He's a man way out there in the blue riding on a smile and a shoe shine. And when they start not smiling back, that's an earthquake. Then you get yourself a couple spots on your hat and you're finished. Nobody das blame this man. Salesman's got a dream, boy. It comes with the territory.
So you do need an omniscient narrator of some sort to be able to tell those kinds of stories, those everyman stories. You know, just like last week, this time his name was Andreas Vickelman.
You could say Fausto's antics kind of dominate the film, but it's interesting, like I noticed, just myself being a writer, that Leopoldo was just sort of kind of abandoned for much of the film, and then he resurfaces towards the end in that wonderful scene at the pier where his dreams are dashed once he realizes what the actor really wants from him. Sometimes it's conventional for the writer, the more intellectual person, the reflective person. I think Jen mentioned Stand By Me. The film definitely kind of ends with the writer, the person who's become the writer, reflecting back because he's got this ability to have a sensitivity or an understanding that the others don't have, and he's able to use that in some way to escape their fates. But in this case, the writer, he goes home, he draws a triangle and watches his characters parade across the wall before lamely hitting on the maid next door.
I think Fellini is making a point with that, which is, of course, because he has his own brother playing the singer, Fellini's own brother. Which is great because he looks exactly like a young Federico Fellini. So it's like every scene you've got Fellini just kind of hovering, in the scene, or at least his double. The writer in here, he's not an intellectual. He's a pseudo-intellectual. Out of this small town, he considers himself the great talent, but nobody's told him that. He's decided that for himself.
And the writing that he reads is pretty overblown at the dinner table. Towards the end.
Funny story. Fellini initially cast Vittorio De Sica, the great neorealist director and also actor, in the role of the actor. In that scene where they're down at the pier and he realizes that the actor is actually a homosexual trying to seduce him. Fellini had De Sica read that. And he said, "I'm sorry, I can't use you for this because everybody is going to hate him for not sleeping with you." Because he was so charming, and so he had to pull in a lesser-known name.
That actor was wonderful in the film.
Vitelloni finds its way into Goodfellas, too. Yes. They introduce the characters the same way.
There was Jimmy and Tommy and me, and there was Anthony Stabile.
How you doing?
Frankie Carbone. And then there was Mo Black's brother, Fat Andy, and his guys, Frankie the Wop, Freddie No Nose.
Naturalmente ci siamo anche noi, i Vitelloni. Questo è Alberto. Questo è Leopoldo, l'intellettuale. Ed ecco Moraldo, che è il più giovane della nostra compagnia.
Ehi, guarda che bello,
There's lots of new techniques used, and the relationships of the people to their parents and to the girlfriends and the marriage, all of that meant it was very, very close to the world I grew up in.
Well, let's look at the structure of this film. Fellini opens it by introducing his crew. He gives us the names and their little quirks and their places in their hierarchy, and you have these little dossiers on them before the story begins. By the time we actually get into the story, when they do pop up, oh, that's that guy who, and this is his quirk, and this is his thing, because Fellini's already introduced that in that opening. It feels jaunty, but it's actually a way of kind of trapping them in their roles. And I think it's also another point that Fellini's making about these overgrown calves, these Vitelloni, that they're trapped in their roles, that they are only what this small town will allow them to be. This is the grandfather of Joey Two-Time. Joey Two-Time gets papers.
Well, it's also there in Mean Streets. So at the very beginning of the film, like it starts off where you have a title and you introduce each of the four main characters. And when you meet Richard Romanus' character, the whole thing about the Japanese lenses turning out to be Japanese adapters. He's just bought a truck full of Japanese adapters. Can't do anything with them. It's hilarious, and it's in that spirit of the opening to I Vitelloni, where there's a kind of ridicule about these characters. Of course, the film goes towards much more tragic directions, but it's there. And then you're kind of traveling down the bar when you go into the bar that one of them owns, and you're meeting these characters and in their environment, similar to...
Was I the only one when they start ordering Antonio around at the bar and they're shooting pool and they're playing tricks on him like, come here, what's wrong with you? Can't hear? Oh, wait, get out of my way. Why are you in my way all the time? Was I the only one who was like, oh my God, it's Joe Pesci and Spider?
Where's my fucking drink? I asked you for a drink.
You wanted a drink?
I just asked you for a fucking drink.
No, I thought you said that you were all right, Spider.
No. What do you got me on a fucking pay no mind list, kid?
I thought I heard someone say something. Spider. I thought it was Henry.
No, you're a fucking mumbling, stuttering little fuck. You know that?
No, I thought you said I was all right, Spider. So...
No, you ain't all right, Spider. You got a lot of fucking problems.
I don't think I would have necessarily made that particular connection, but I think generally the liveliness of the filmmaking, the variation in the cuts, which is really incredible, and just like that bon vivant making life out of nothing kind of style and feel of it is definitely there in Scorsese. And Scorsese is an incredible writer or co-writer, whatever you want to say about him. I remember reading an interview with Woody Allen where he just marveled at Scorsese's writing, and he said it's like a texture over the whole film. And I think he is getting that from here, this general kind of, I don't know how to, it's almost like a pattern on a fabric. Fine and little bits here and there that are just kind of wonderfully like just interposed.
See, I would use the word metered. It's almost like a metered poetry, the way they talk back and forth. Even though it's vulgar, the way they talk back and forth. It's got there's a meter to a Fellini film. And the way the dialogue goes back and forth. It's not strictly realistic.
I mean, Italian has its own pacing or thing, but I can hear what you're talking about with that for sure. Slice of their lives, right? I did get that feel from the film. That was
well, I think the moving camera is a Joyce technique. Going back to what I was saying about how Fellini uses the camera to recreate what Joyce did in terms of the multiple narrators. The camera is constantly moving, telling a different story. A story is going on right behind the camera. Fellini will literally turn that camera around. You're watching the camera turn around and get you to focus on that story while still playing the sound behind the camera of the other story going on so that you've got both stories going on. And it creates an atmosphere. Fellini is big, and this is something that Erin can talk about too, because she's seen Lena Wertmuller do this also in Seven Beauties. He will start with a long-distance shot and then cut to a really, really tight close-up. And it's at first visually jarring. So you have this long shot and then you just get this close-up. And then you get these close-up of it, when you look at like the carnival scene, of the grotesquerie of the makeup and the dancing with the disembodied head. It's almost uncanny. Like almost there's a bit of a breaking the fourth wall about how close he gets to these faces. We dealt last week with Ingmar Bergman, who is somebody who seems to really love faces. Fellini, on the other hand, he's mocking in his camera work the faces of almost all of his characters in a way. In the way that he's got the camera so close up to their faces most of the film.
So like painting them like a grotesque, you mean? Or mocking them?
It is almost a kind of a Breckian mask technique. The heads in Fellini films all feel oversized for the body because of the particular angles that he uses. And the fact that he's constantly shooting with this 25-30 millimeter lens, which is too wide for the close-up that he's trying to do. But then he's lit it, and he's got enough deep focus on it that, yeah, it stretches the face in a way and makes it grotesque.
That's interesting. I mean, the grotesque thing I definitely saw with the theater actor when he's down on the pier trying to get, lure Leopoldo down there into the darkness. There, the lighting is really lit in a very stark way to show him as very scary, causing Leopoldo to run away. I'd really have to watch it at least a few times to be able to give anything kind of close to what Eric has talked about. But I can say this. You might remember last week I said, like, for me, the films that I tend to love the most have something in the rhythm and the editing that just my body responds to, like I just get mesmerized and captivated. I'm middle-aged now, and so I can't sit through films as easily in the theater as I used to at one time. My body can immediately respond if I'm into the film, if the rhythm, the editing, the movements are working for me. I'll forget my aches and pains and I'll just sit through it wrapped. Whereas if it's not, I will be very conscious of my aches and pains. I may have to stand up, etc. So this film, I was watching it at home, obviously, on my laptop, but it really, really did that for me. And so there were a few times when I was very conscious of things. So maybe the Carnival sequence is probably the best example of that. I was just completely captivated by just the sense of life and the exuberance and the rhythm and, just joy and life bursting forth. And I just marveled at all the quick cuts that he used, but at the same time, they were stationary. He wasn't using traveling camera or anything. And then the morning after, when Ricardo, who was sitting there just kind of forlorn on the steps with the giant puppet head or whatever it was, like just the feeling of desolation and kind of the morning after, the kind of feeling empty. I do believe there was traveling camera used in the film, but I was never really consciously aware of it. With Scorsese or Coppola, you're very conscious of their cinematic techniques, and that's what makes them so great. But here it was just so subtle. And even the music, I knew it was by Nino Rota, but I had to kind of remind myself to consciously pay attention to that. So I was just drawn into the film and drawn along by the life and the telling of it. I remember when I was young trying to watch Amarcord, and I just gave up.
A bit too grotesque for you?
I think it was just too artificial for me. It was too, the rhythm was weird, and I was young, so I probably didn't have enough film appreciation in me to really get it. People love Fellini. And I really like 8.5 and La Dolce Vita, but I never got La Strada or Nights of Cabiria as much as other people did. To finally watch this and being given reason to watch this, thank you, and just loving it. It was just this wonderful kind of almost transition point between the formal Italian stuff, the more formal Italian stuff. I was thinking of this Visconti film called maybe Rocco and His Brothers, something like that, which is kind of more serious, but maybe has some overlap here. That's from later, though. The more serious Rossellini stuff, right, that had come out before this, and then the almost freewheeling, free kind of exuberant cinema that's like divorced of the older codes, the social codes and stuff that you can still see in this film, in the parents and the way they behave. The way Sandra's parents are very inimical to Fausto's family. Like, they're not even allowed to visit, really, Fausto's family. But, like, Fausto's father still has this very serious, self-respectability about him and carries out honor. It's just wonderful, wonderful stuff. Sorry.
Nino Rota obviously is most known here in the United States for his Godfather, one of Erin Brown's top 10 films, actually. But Sila, did you find this was one of the scores that you complain about where every single scene has to have its own theme and the music is doing the thinking for you? Or were you like me and were actually able to kind of abide what he's doing with this? Because before he was writing for Coppola, I felt like Rota was Fellini's secret weapon. I think without the musical score, this becomes a movie about a bunch of guys just sitting around doing nothing. But when you hear that lonely woodwind as Moraldo stands on the beach, which is the direct ancestor of the Godfather waltz, I think there's a shared kind of, I could be that guy there on the beach. And I don't think that had anything to do with how the scene was shot, how it was acted, or how it was written. I think that all came down to Rocha's music. But Sila Blume, your thoughts, first of all, on the score on this?
I think there's something that cannot be explained, not even by a professor or a expert level a person may have. And that is why the epistemology of how one got to where one is in terms of believing or accepting or liking something. It was just organically correct in the intensity of the piece, in the how much background it was, how much foreground is. It never came to a point where it bothered me as background music. And I simply cannot explain how that works for me. I perceived very quickly in Caravaggio that it was very, very agreeable, but I cannot explain why. He is using what in English I think is called the singing saw. And what the singing saw is, and that's the reason it's so special to me, my father, he played the singing saw. And that is when you take a regular saw from construction, it's just a regular saw, and you put it between your legs with the teeth facing towards you. Then you take one hand and you move the end of the saw back and forth. And on the other side of the saw, you strike the bow of a cello. And that's exactly what that sounds like. And I'm 99% sure that that was a singing saw in terms of that sound. But that's just a romantic side with me. I recognize that in several parts that he uses that. But to the music, I would just say that I found it very agreeable. It was not imposed. It was just, it belonged to that film, especially to that time, especially to Italy, the tone, everything.
Erin, did you feel the DNA of The Godfather?
Not really. I didn't know it was the same composer, and the music didn't really stand out to me, not in a bad way, but it's so seamless with the film. The images that you're seeing, it didn't hit me as, hey, pay attention to this music. It was good. It was very well done. I didn't make that connection.
I did enjoy some of the music. I don't know that it stood out to me as much as some of The Godfather, but I did like parts of it. I think one of the favorite parts I had is sort of what Koom had said, and even I think Sila said it as well, that like sort of the slice of life, but liveliness, like of the different parts that I see the appeal of those parts. I did like those parts of the film. Just, I could feel what it would feel like to be in that time, and then also to find some, I guess, community and vibrance and that kind of stuff in the time. I don't know that the score like blew me away, but it didn't nail me over the head, but I also wasn't focused on it. But sometimes in films it just jumps out at me and I love it a ton. So, yeah. Can't say that in
But
this
you
instance.
were too busy being an angry feminist lesbian.
No, I mean not.
Ooh.
Yeah,
She said
that
it. I didn't. I was
I
quoting
I
her.
I did say it, and it's my quote. I did feel that way watching this. I was like, wow, and I do appreciate that. It's Italians, right? It is cultural. It is also in Hispanic or Latina cultures. It's a thing. I get that, but it was really more than machismo in the way. Like, see those document. We're going down that. We already explained all that. It's a different thing. It's not the same as the no consent thing and the pushing on the no consent. And then even the boys behaving badly, watching him do it, right? And not see something, say something, not standing up. I mean, that change in our world
Well,
is
am
going to come
I
from
the only
others.
one who felt like they were actually looking up to Fausto until the end? Like that he was kind of like the hero of the group, and then at the end he was finally brought to earth.
Isn't he mentioned as the leader of their group when they're introduced at the beginning?
Yeah,
Spiritual.
yeah,
Even,
spiritual leader.
I mean, I
I
found
mean,
that. And I wanted to make a couple of comments. I noticed the second time I watched it that the only individuals acting the main character, if I could call that main characters, the friends, the men friends, the only two that are not using their real names are Moraldo and Fausto. All the other characters are using their real names. Franco is Moraldo, Alberto is Alberto, Franco is Fausto, Leopoldo is Leopoldo, and Ricardo, Ricardo. I don't know if I'm stretching this a little bit too much, but Moraldo, for me, is got to be morality connected. The youngest of them all, which is the brother of Sandra, he's the youngest, and his name is Moraldo. And he seems to be the one carrying the morality, the core of what they're supposed to be, which explains to me, and maybe the reason he should not have left, how it was mentioned before. And Fausto, I need not say more about that. And using him as the leader of the pack, I found that very interesting how these two are the only ones who don't have their own names. And I don't know if Fellini is really intending something with this particular names. There's also this focus on the unlikable characters and the likable ones. And for me, this is not so much. And as you already mentioned, I had to think about the end of The Passion of Anna when he says at the end, and this is the story of Fausto and Sandra until now. So it it takes it away from the personal situation. And I really don't think that the focus of the film for me is not so much on these characters or on the role of the Italian macho and the submissive, although I think that's a little bit overdone with submissive. They're not really submissive. And also, but she said towards the end of the film, she says, and if you do this or that, I will kill you. Or he says something. So she's not
I'll
really,
beat you myself.
yeah. So she's not submitting to just submitting to everything he does. And that's also a thing that I really enjoyed about the film. And it's only acting, it's only the idea of Fellini. Nevertheless, even though I like to complain about stories, we get something very valuable from stories. And in this story, it is very well for me portrayed how much these two who really know nothing about life, but there's somehow, for some reason, there's a very deep love that they have towards each other. And I believe him when he says that he loves her, even though he likes to play around because of immaturity or whichever other reason. But I believe he loves her. And when he is beaten by the father, she has to break in. She cannot let that happen. So I found this very nice about the film, that there's a natural energy in all the characters to do whatever they have to do.
I can't relate to these characters at all, except kind of having been male and young at one time and not knowing myself and having been directionless and having, urges that I couldn't fulfill. Like maybe that general thing, but these are not characters who are like my friends, who are like me. I mean, I certainly started working at a young age and felt the need to do that to pay the bills and be responsible for myself. But I think it's because this the microcosm of society and time and place and the people inhabiting it is so well portrayed. That's the appeal of the film for me. And that's been the appeal of a lot of films, but I'm not a woman, so I understand how being relegated to almost like a non-status or a lesser status in the hierarchy of that film's values can be extremely off-putting and feel demeaning. So I'm sorry about that. I can only explain that my delight in the film is not coming from really relating to the characters, but what the film does.
So many things that you saw in this film appear again and again and again in the film. You know that shot where you just see the Catholic school letting out and nun leading the little nunlets across the beach? Some version of that shot is in every Fellini film, I think. So many of these things become tropes in Fellini films. And after, say, Juliet of the Spirit, maybe even before, maybe Juliet of the Spirit can be part of it, but after 8.5, Fellini became such a big name and internationally well-known, the great maestro. He didn't really know what to do with himself. He began parodying his own work throughout the rest of his career. I disagree with Koom Kankesan. I think it's a great film, but I can see it's an extremely vulgar, over-the-top, grotesque film for somebody who hasn't grown with Fellini and seen him do this. But he has become, there's a story, and it's probably made up by Ken Russell, but Ken Russell tells the story that Fellini, when he met Ken Russell, said, in Italy, they call me the Italian Ken Russell. Well, what was Ken Russell? He was the grotesque camp artist. When you look at films like Tommy, The Devil, The Boyfriend, Altered States, everything was dialed up to 11 and over the top. That was the whole point of Ken Russell. After 8.5, maybe Juliet and the Spirits, films from Fellini became parodying his own, I think, better work.
Interesting. An interesting trajectory of what he was doing.
Fellini was the disciple of Rossellini. He was raised in neorealism. Cameras on the street, objective truths. But here he starts to drift. Think of the ending. Moraldo finally gets on the train to leave. Fellini breaks the contract with his mentors right here. It is a technical miracle. As the train pulls away, the camera doesn't stay with Moraldo. It begins to move through the bedrooms of the friends he's leaving behind at the exact same speed as the train. The camera is the train, but it's traveling through a space where no train could be. Fellini is breaking the physical contract of the world. He's showing us that Moraldo isn't just leaving a physical city, he's traveling through his own memories of these people. In Godard, the camera was used as a weapon and used to perform a lobotomy, but Fellini, he loves these losers. Even Fausto, the cat, is treated with a sort of mercy. There's a shared recognition in their failure, but also in their humanity.
I did notice that, and I appreciate you explaining it. I love the movement of trains in films and use of them as symbolism or transportation. Tokyo Story, where remember they had the boats going all the way left and all the way right, and then the trains going left and right at different angles. Like, I don't know why I pick up the vibe of that, and I like it. And I really appreciate the way you just described that, Eric. I think it's cool.
Just like I love the film in general, I mentioned earlier that I wasn't as aware of moving camera in the film, which I normally love, because I think it was done very artfully, very gradually, but the technique at the end is really much more dramatic because of that, because it's much more noticeable and it's much more modern. And I think it kind of harkens to the kind of, films I really like that come later. I would kind of ask the group, maybe if we're discussing the ending, what note do you think it ends on? Because one possible ending could have been the aftermath of the beating that Fausto's dad gives him, and everything kind of just goes back to the jolly, young, immature kind of sense of life and bon vivant, somewhat relatively carefree or deferring responsibility, deferring maturity.
Well, that goes back to what Sila said last week about shame, where now that I've been punished, does that mean you forgive me? And the difference between, being punished and asking for forgiveness.
But the feeling of the film isn't like that, right? Whereas I think the end of this film is a bit more ambiguous. Why is the kid there? Why is the kid walking along the track, etc.? The parting is done in secret from his friends. Even with the kid, he didn't plan on seeing the kid. And there's a sense of kind of misgiving about him leaving, and he's sneaking away stealthily. Is that because he doesn't want to tell his mom? Is that because he's feeling his friends will betray him? Is that because he feels some sense of patriotic tie to his town? Is there something sad about that? Because he says, like, the only way to change or grow up is to leave. So all of those things are there.
I think he explains that. Basically, the narrator says he knew that if he told his friends he was leaving, they'd be able to talk him into staying.
Okay, I must have missed that particular thing if that was said.
I felt a bit of hope about him at the end, but that could have me being the story I wanted to see, for sure, me projecting that on here, especially because I do like that. I was going to say
Fellini
trope,
had said that Moraldo was him deciding to leave Rimini, and he went to go work with Roberto Rossellini, and he co-wrote Rome Open City and became a big film director. So if Fellini is correct, it was a very happy ending.
Yeah, except he did. I read just the Wikipedia page. That's all I had time to read before we did our recording. But apparently he had some struggles.
Well, you did more research than I did then.
And what was interesting, too, that was highlighted in the Wikipedia biography was that he didn't immediately pursue the career of a filmmaker. He actually started out as a caricaturist, a cartoonist. They would do sketches of people, like caricatures for money, especially American soldiers and stuff. He was very taken by comics growing up, especially American comics that were translated into Italian. I think, and especially myself being a huge fan of comics and cartooning, I can definitely see how that love of comics and caricature and cartooning has also influenced his unique kind of style and sensibility. What would be a more mordant film in somebody else's hands, or a more kind of sociological study, becomes kind of a livelier enterprise with really wonderful, portrayals because of that love of comedy and cartooning.
That field of interest earlier, I think, would support that the way he treats in the carnival, for example, the way Eric mentioned before, the way he makes fun of the faces. That's where that comes from then.
Yeah.
Fellini draws his storyboards before he casts his film, and then he goes out and he looks for the cast to look like the storyboards that he drew.
Oh, that's great.
I want to give a couple of notes to your question towards the end. I like it very much, this camera trick, if I can call it that. As he goes away in the train, he goes through the rooms of all these people sleeping. But for me, much more relevant than that seems to be the fact that Moraldo, and I think Koom referred to that earlier, that he is actually leaving. And the happiness of the boy, of course, I don't have this connection to Fellini in any other way, but through this film. So I don't know any of the connections that I can make, symbolics that he uses in his films, or his typical signature. But just by the raw witnessing of him being very touched and actually sad that he's leaving, and the happiness of the boy just running along, he's not solving any problems. Why is he leaving? And I understand that there's no reason to stay, and he has to move ahead. But I'm a little bit taken by the symbolic that I smell behind someone leaving instead of staying, and I don't trust it to be a very sound concept.
Fausto, once Sandra's pregnancy is discovered, he tries to take off on a train to Milan. Everybody in the community basically like pins him down and says, you have to do the right thing. You have to marry her. And then they can leave, but they have to come back because they can't make it there. Whereas Moraldo potentially might make it when he leaves. There's just an interesting kind of mirroring there.
What is there for him in Rimini? As long as he is tied to his sister and his father and his mother, he's never going to become Fellini. This little beach town that has a carnival once a year isn't going to provide any kind of a future for a man like him. And I think that's the meaning of the ending. But Scylla is right in that Fellini doesn't show Moraldo as having any kind of an extraordinary talent that, going to someplace like Rome would be able to exploit. But then I don't think Fellini had that either until he left Rimini. It's something that he discovered when he got there.
Yeah, and as a writer, from what I read on the Wikipedia page, he was able to work with certain filmmakers, including Rossellini, and he got attention as a writer. And then when he finally got to make a solo film, he did co-direct a film with somebody. But when he got to make a solo film, it bombed big time.
Variety Lights was the film he co-directed, and then The White. Yeah.
The White Shake, yeah.
Or The White Shake.
This film seems to have just turned everything around for him. Won awards.
But it didn't become a big hit until 1956.
Yeah, it's weird. It gets recognized in the States like years later. Like, I read 1958. I was like, what happened? Why 5 years? But maybe...
Well, that was because it was after
World War
La Strada was such a huge hit.
Oh, I thought you were going to say maybe still after World War II for a while. It was just taking longer for distribution networks to get film.
No, it didn't really take off. It was a local hit in Rimini, but it didn't really take off in Italy. It was only when it got international distribution a couple of years later that it became a big hit.
And I also just kind of noticed that all of the characters in the film, the main characters, they all kind of sound similar too, so you can sort of like interchange them almost or interpose them. Their haircuts are kind of similar. They're all really well dressed for having no money, I have to say, but I guess that's Italy for you.
Scylla, you had to appreciate that. When I go out and stalk a woman, I dress like a goddamn gentleman.
Sorry.
Well, don't forget we're talking about the 50s. So even in the motorcycle people in England, they all have their suits.
The teddy boys, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but these guys looked incredible. Like there was not a hair out of place. It was
watch Saturday night and Sunday morning and look at how the teddy boys look. There's not a hair out of place on a teddy boy either. Yeah. It was the era. It was definitely the era.
To that point where, the woman he's hitting on at the cinema runs into him towards the end of the film when he's looking for Sandra, and she says, "Why aren't you shaved?" Like, it's just like, I'm like, I don't shave for days. Like, that guy looks fine to me. But, anyway, so that was one thing. And the other thing is I got to visit Cinecittà when I visited Rome. I was very excited to go there. And there's apparently one stage that he really liked to use there. It was just empty at the time, but, the tour guide showed it to us and said, this is Fellini's favorite stage or something like that. And it's just a big, open kind of warehouse.
Empty fucking room.
Yeah. They still had the exterior set up for a scene or a set from The Gangs of New York. Cinecittà had just left that stage up, even though it'd been years since the filming of Gangs of New York.
I felt like the ending was bittersweet. I thought it was hopeful. I was glad that he was leaving to go out on his own and do his thing. I like seeing that his friends were all in bed. They were safe, but they were stagnant. They weren't going to change. And he didn't want to be like that anymore. And I thought it was great. I also thought it was well shot. I like the way the whole film was shot. It was really pretty, really clean. I really enjoyed it.
Wait, really pretty, I get. What do you mean by really clean?
Like really in focus. Like there's no shadows that shouldn't be where they are. I don't know. It looks.
It didn't look like a film from 1953, did it?
And
Yeah, it
deliberate?
looked
Is that what you mean?
just like really well focused, well lit. I know that film is literally a series of still photographs, but that's what it looked
It's no,
like.
I
That
get
was
exactly
the
what you're
darkest thing.
saying, though,
Okay, good.
Aaron. A film from
Yeah,
1953 has a kind of certain grit to it, a certain
yeah, and
graininess, and this film
this
doesn't
doesn't even
have
have
that.
that. Yeah, yeah, it's very much a bunch of very clear images throughout the whole thing, and I really like that. I like the look of it.
I learned once again from Wikipedia, it was shot on the fly. Well, not on the fly, but more by moving around because the guy I think who plays Alberto was in the White Shake and he was considered box office poison. So and he only wanted to do the film if he got to play Fausto, but the studio didn't want him to even be in the film or whatever. But eventually he relented, but he was touring as an actor, a stage actor. And so Fellini and the rest of the company had to tour around with him and shoot in between his performances.
Well, for instance, half of the Carnival scene was actually shot on a back lot, and the other half was shot inside a theater where they stripped the seats out.
But you wouldn't think
just recreated the scenes.
You would think everything was shot in one town, and it was really well location scouted.
That's not the Fellini way. No, yeah, he rebuilt all of Rome for La Dolce Vita inside of Cinecittà Studios. There isn't a single shot of Rome in La Dolce Vita, for instance.
Does that explain maybe the deliberate camera movements and the cleanliness of it?
It's why he did it that way, was so he could do those things, and so it would have that look. Because you can't do that out on location.
Right, that's what I felt like.
You can't lay down railroad tracks through Rimini. People still have to live there. You can't run all the lighting wires, and that's why he wanted so much control over every shot, was so, as Aaron said, he could have a film that didn't look like your typical 1953 movie.
I'm going to say thank you to all of my compatriots here on the panel. It was great to look at this film through different perspectives and to appreciate some things about it, and even to see some different views on my snarky view of part of it, or my icky view of part of it. So I want to watch the other film, right? The Lena Wertmuller, Seven Beauties. I don't think I watched it when we went past that in the series, so it'd be interesting to watch that and maybe watch another Fellini film. Yeah, I mean, it's one thing I like. I like coming and talking about things and seeing different perspectives. So I'm here for that. Thanks.
Cinema Paradiso was made by another one of Fellini's lifelong assistants. That would give you a kind of a good idea of Fellini's influence.
I liked it. Overall, I liked it. I understand what Jennifer was saying about it, being very male oriented and a lot of stuff that is really disgusting. But I also feel like it's a product of its time, and we still get movies like that where it's gross. So I just had to shut off that part of my brain and just take it for what was presented. And I thought it was overall lighthearted and goofy and fun, and a very pretty movie the way it was shot. Even though it was black and white, it was still, everything was very clear. And I'm not gonna put it as one of my favorites, but I would watch it again if it came around.
I quite liked it. The flaws of the characters and their faults were redeemed by the fact that it was a satire for me, and it quite highlighted their flaws in a very kind of humorous kind of way without being sarcastic about it. I also understand that being a woman watching it might not be the same. And I also think we have to remember that even though the film does have, I think, some ambiguities and complexities in terms of the women and their agencies and what they want, it's also ultimately being written by men. So it's being framed in a world that's being designed by men. But anyway, that topic aside, I generally really liked it. It means that I think, many years later, have to kind of give Fellini another chance, and I have to see the films by him that I haven't seen and rewatch the ones I have and see if I see them differently now or like them more or find I can understand them better intuitively. But this one really stood out.
I just like the detail, little things that are mentioned, things that we don't even really speak about. And I think one of them would be the type of unique, in some bad ways, but in some good ways, just unique relationship that these 6 men had developed. I don't know how many years they had been together. I know that him and Sandra grew up together, but I don't know how long the men had been friends. But in 2 instances, when Moraldo defends Fausto because they're talking about him, and he says, "No, he's not. He's not like you say. He's not just a beast, as you say." So there was a certain substance between this. Let's say men, Italian men in this way, that substance would be very different in Cuba and very different in Texas. But in a very particular way, the connection they had, I enjoyed very much to notice that. And there was another instance where I also found a very unusual way of demonstrating a connection. So I always like to find little things like that just to think about. And I was not able to press like on my letterbox because I just couldn't. It's not that I don't like the film, but I'm glad that I have been exposed to it, definitely, and I have my questions about it. And most of them, I think, the statement that Fellini, in my view, is making about society, I don't quite understand because I'm not Italian and I have never lived there. And when I was in 1953, I was not born yet. So I find it a little bit difficult to say too much, but even though I have said already a lot.
So, Sila, where can people find you online?
I could be found, my materials could be found at silablume.life.
Generally by Googling Koom Kankesan, Kankesan. You can find old film reviews and things I've done about comics and interviews with comics creators. My book, Killing Shakespeare, a novel, you can order that through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, whoever else you get your books from. And if you do read Killing Shakespeare, please leave me a Goodreads review so I know what you thought, or say hello on Facebook or Instagram.
Gilbert Baker Film Festival.lgbt, and on Instagram, Gilbert Baker Film Fest. And through those places, you'll find link trees to all of our other socials and ways to get in touch with the film festival and with me, Jen Trujillo.
You can find us at ko-fi.com/world cinema history. You can find me on Blue Sky at Toad Puppy, and you can also find me on YouTube
All right.
at
Now, Jennifer,
Pizza Horse Productions.
you didn't like Vitelloni, so I'm sure next week's film is going to be 100 times better because, of course, you're choosing. No pressure. But what is next week's film, Jennifer?
I'm choosing, but I think it'll have interesting ties into some films that we've done and to some things we've talked about over the last few weeks with the different films. I have chosen Bound from 1996 by the Wachowskis. Anyways, I'm really looking forward to the conversation. I love the movie. I will say that. No one else has to love it, but I know that I do.
So a lot to look forward to here on World Cinema History. Thanks for listening.
Now it's all over. And that's the hardest part. Today everything is different. There's no action. I have to wait around like everyone else. Can't even get decent food. Right after I got here, I ordered some spaghetti with marinara sauce and I got egg noodles and ketchup. I'm an average nobody. Get to live the rest of my life like a schnook.
A glorious catastrophe! Right, we've smashed the pretty pictures of your culture, vulture fixtures. Got no future, got no plan, just a feral modern man. So tear it down, don't feel no shame. Let's burn it down, it's all a game. Anarchy, pure anarchy. Anarchy for you and